Good morning, class. Today we're going to be learning about the Lewis and Clark expedition. First, I want you to take some time to read this article that we have. After reading it to yourself, we will go over it as a whole class and discuss it. So I'm going to pull it up on the whiteboard, and you can go ahead and read that article. And after you get done, we will review it as a whole group. You also have a printout of this article that I gave you this morning. So go ahead and read over that. Okay. Alrighty, let's move on here. Why do you think people want to discover new lands, and why is it still exciting today? Anybody? Okay. Why do you think people back then wanted to explore? Who knows what exploring means? That's right. So why do you think people back then wanted to explore? What would make it interesting to you if you were an explorer? If you had to explore new land, what would make it interesting to you? Those are some great answers. During their journey, Lewis and Clark sent back their findings to President Thomas Jefferson. So today, I want you to pull out those boxes that I asked you to bring from last night, and we're going to fill it with things that we think they might have found on their journey. You will take your findings back to your parents. But first, let's watch this neat video about Lewis and Clark.
Georgia has 186 hospitals serving 10 million people. The John Ossoff's radical healthcare scheme could close nearly a quarter of them, putting families at risk in a pandemic while raising taxes on Georgia workers by thousands. We can't afford John Ossoff.
Here we go. Okay, here we go.
Now this is some history, all about how a little group went west and what they found. And I'd like to take a minute, just settle right in. I'll tell you all about the Lewis and Clark expedition. In 1803, President Jefferson paid 50 million francs for some new territory, but that wasn't enough. He wanted more, find a Pacific waterway and explore. Knew a couple of guys who weren't too busy, put together a team called the Corps of Discovery, set off for adventure, and Jefferson said, I've got a lot riding on this, so don't end up dead. Sailed up the Missouri, day after day, searching for that northwest pathway. Encountered all these animals that were new. Crew looked at each other and said, this is kinda cool. Reached the Mandan village after first snow, then the temperature dropped to 45 below. Is this what to expect in this new land? We might need a new plan. Met Sacagawea and her fur trading husband. Odds to make it west now better than they had been. Smooth sailing west until they hit the mountains. Came across Shoshones while out scouting. The chief was the brother of Sacagawea. Gave her a big hug and said, it's good to see ya. They were very helpful, those kind Shoshones. A route through the mountains and some ponies. Coming down the mountain, food was scarce. Met a new tribe, the Nez Perce. Offered food and trees, they cut down a few. Hollowed them out to make some canoes. Careful instructions were then delivered so the crew could set down the Columbia River. After a year and a half, they made it to the ocean. Western settlement would soon be in motion. Ready to head back, their knowledge valuable. Maps and discoveries of plants and animals.
Alright, that was a fun little song. Let's see here. What did you think about that song? It was pretty fun, huh? What kinds of things do you think that we will discover that Lewis and Clark found years ago on their expedition? Now let's decorate our boxes while we use our inside voices to one another and discuss what we think we will find. Okay? Good morning, class. This is day 2 of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Let's get our boxes out and go through all these things that we are going to find. First, we have this little guy. He's a prairie dog. I want you to fill in a description of the prairie dog. What does he look like, smell like? What do you think he smells like? Does he have fur? Is he slick? Where do you think he lives? Okay. We're going to go through the grizzly bear, the map, the Native American shirt, the corn, and the buffalo. Now that we have gone over 6 of these things that Lewis and Clark discovered, let's get our devices out and do some research. When you find a new finding on a certain date linked to Lewis and Clark's expedition, I want you to log it in this timeline sheet I'm going to hand you. This is what the timeline sheet looks like. Okay? So you're just going to write a description of what you find and the date, if you can find one. Let's use our brains and think of some more things. How has the United States changed since Lewis and Clark's time? Why do people like to discover new things? What are some of the differences in how people travel today compared to 200 years ago? Yes, those are all great answers. What do you know about the land in the West? What do you think it felt like? What kinds of animals live there? And lastly, describe what Lewis and Clark would have seen as they crossed the United States. What is all those things that we found? Good job, class.